Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Welcome to our Wednesday Roundtable at Lido Visiting Forces Agreement ang ating pag-uusapan ngayong araw na ito, ika-23 sa buwan ng Hunyo 2021. We will be joined by the Honorable Carlos Isagani Zarate, party list ng Bayan Muna. Nasa linya na rin po naman si Dr. Chester Cabalza, President and Founder ng International Development and Security Cooperation. At siya po ay nakapag-aral ng military diplomacy sa PLA Academy sa China. Makakasama na rin natin si Attorney Antonio A. Ligon, isang profesor sa De La Salle University. And a bit later on, si Professor Lucio Blanco Pitlo III, Research Fellow ng Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation. And of course, Attorney Dennis Gurecho, Head ng Seafarers Division ng Sapalo Veles, Bundang, Bulilan Law Offices. So, ngayong umagang ito, mga kaibigan, pag-usapan na natin ang mga issue na bumabalot sa Visiting Forces Agreement. Let's start with Dr. Chester Cabalza. What are your thoughts about the VFA?
Yeah, thank you for inviting us again, Sir Melo. No, okay, let's go direct to the point. No, the VFA is the legal framework for the operationalization of the Mutual Defense Treaty. At napaka-importante nito. 75 years ng ating treaty alliance with the US, and definitely ang tanong ng karamihan, bakit kailangan ihinto ito? Kailangan sa isang pagkakaibigan, we need to review certain flaws in some of our treaties, at nakita nga natin dito sa VFA na ito. But beyond that, there may be some sour relationship, like love-hate relationship ang US at ang Pilipinas. But nonetheless, let's give a second chance for the VFA. Dahil importante ito, lalong-lalo na sa external defense natin. We know for a fact that we want to project a respectable defense posture. At alam natin na kung i-review natin ito, plaplansyahin natin na mabuti, makakatulong ito sa pagtatanggol ng ating soberanya. And I think that would be the help of the VFA in the future.
Okay, thank you. Congressman Kaloy Zarate, magandang araw po and welcome to the discussions. What are your thoughts about yung naudlot na abrogation ng Visiting Forces Agreement?
Yes, good morning Melo, at magandang umaga rin sa ating mga kasamahan and other guests dito sa ating roundtable. Sa simula pa lang, Melo, tingin ko ay wala naman talagang sincere at totoong plano, seryosong plano na i-abrogate na nga itong DFA, ng Duterte administration. I think it was just used as a leverage by the administration to get concessions from the US. Despite the bluster and rhetorics by this present administration, we know for a fact especially the security forces, ang security sector, ang kanyang bias pa rin is towards maintaining its relationship with its old master and partner, ang United States. So, and it's now very clear dito sa pangatlong beses na ata itong extension ng supposed abrogation ng Visiting Forces Agreement. It is now again extended to another 6 months, and incidentally, days prior to that extension, tumanggap na naman ng milyon-milyon na aid, military aid, ang Armed Forces of the Philippines from the United States. So that speaks volume kung saan papunta itong Visiting Forces Agreement, Melo.
So at this point, would you say it's just a facade to get more from the United States, at the same time getting a lot more from the People's Republic of China?
Kung titingnan mo kasi ang mga antecedent facts, Melo, bakit ba dumating sa punto na gusto nang kansilahin ni Pangulong Duterte yung VFA, makikita mo hindi ganoon kalalim yung dahilan niya. Una, for example, nung nag-decide siya na threaten siya na i-cancel ito, sabi nung this was the time when I think the Millennium program of the US that gives aid to countries, allies nila, ay nakalink doon sa human rights issue. So nagalit doon ang si Presidente Duterte. At pangalawa, na dahilan niya nung makancel or napabalitang kinancel ang visa ni Senator Bato de la Rosa. So I think this is not really a deeper or deep reason, no, nung pinorward niya, no. It's not even citing na sa ating constitution, for example, in the Declaration of Principles, sinabi doon that we renounce war, no, and we have to pursue peace and amity with all nations. Hindi rin niya sinayt halimbawa yung policy of state policy na magkaroon tayo ng independent foreign policy, no? So yung mga rason na binigay niya, talagang nakita natin na mababaw at sabi ko nga parang these are just forwarded as a leverage, no, to get more concessions from the United States, and possibly to show na also na yung sinasabi na tuta siya ng China ay hindi totoo yun. But that's even more dangerous because it appears that you are playing on both sides of this contest, no, for superiority ng dalawang imperialist countries now in the Asia-Pacific region, no, China and the US.
Okay. Babalikan po natin yung issue na yan. Attorney Tony Ligon, what are your thoughts about the Visiting Forces Agreement? In earlier discussions, it was said as just part of the Mutual Defense Treaty at ng Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, and without the Visiting Forces Agreement, baliwala na rin yung Mutual Defense Treaty na magdiriwang na ikapitong dekada ngayon. Attorney Ligon? Paki-unmute lang po muna.
Yeah, magandang umaga, Camelo. Magandang umaga sa mga tagapanood natin. On the academic point of view, hindi ko muna bibigyan ng anumang kulay ang lahat ng yan. Yung sinasabi na pag-cancela o pag-abrogate, mukhang wala talagang clear direction dahil tama si Congressman Sarate, lahat ng mga naging dahilan hindi naman ganun kalalim. Ang iniintay siyempre ng taong bayan sa mga ganitong usapin ay ano ba talaga ang polisiya mo, kung tatanggapin mo ba ang ganyang pag-ugnayan, no? Sa isang banda, dito sa nangyayaring issue dito sa West Philippine Sea at sa ginagawa ng China, nakikita natin din yung katotohanan na yung pag-amba na nandyan yung Visiting Forces Agreement at maaaring ituloy pa rin ang ugnayan ng Pilipinas sa Estados Unidos, isang ambayan doon sa kabilang puwersa, sa tinatawag nating geopolitics geopolitics conflict between US and China. Sila yung malaki, tayo yung pangatlong nasa ilalim, no? Yung existence and continuous Visiting Forces Agreement will give some kind of leverage to the Philippines. That's correct. Now, ang kailangan siguro ilinawin talaga ng ating pamahalaan, ano ba ang gusto nating maging kasunduan sa ganyang bagay. Pag sinabi nating kasunduan, is it really beneficial to us at the end, no? Ang perception ng benefit is kasi tutulong sa atin, merong mga exercises dito, baka tulungan tayo ng Amerikano when it comes to pagdating dyan sa conflict sa China. There must be a clear stand also on that matter. Of course, sa ating yung mga nakakaalam ng mga suliranin sigalat dyan sa West Philippine Sea, if you will check the news, no, they welcome the extension dahil nga magandang it's a good show, no, against China's creeping invasion to the West Philippine Sea. Anyway, para sa akin, no, bilang mamamayan, mas kailangang mas may matibay at mas may malinaw na direksyon ang ugnayan ng dalawang bansa, no? Hindi pwedeng ginagawa mong carrot and stick yung mga agreement para lang magkaroon ka ng boses. Kaya dun sa puntong yon, sinasang-ayunan ko si Congressman Zarate, yung ating kaibigan na nagsabing makakatulong yan, tama rin naman. At ang talagang point lang natin, ano yung sinceridad or what is the real intent and spirit when we enter into this kind of agreement. Dapat the government will not also try to dangle with the other countries na ito, meron kaming ganito, and at the same time, kaya mo lang hindi ipagpapatuloy for a shallow reason. Nagiging mababaw ang tingin din sa atin ng ibang bansa. Nawawala yung tamang respeto sa pananaw ko.
Okay. Let me take you back to the 90s. Isang estudyante sa UP noon ay kasama natin ngayon, si Attorney Dennis Gorecho. Dennis, ano yung recollection mo noong resistance ng mga kabataan noon sa pagpapanatili pa ng mga Amerikano sa Pilipinas?
Magandang umaga, Melo. Natatandaan ko kasi niyan 1991 yan. And during that time kasi I was still at UP Diliman and I'm part of the Philippine Collegiate. So during that time, I've been covering several events, lalo na itong anti-bases rally. Tawag natin anti-base rally. Kasi during that time, mainit talagang usapan. Ano bang gagawin dito sa mga military base ng US? And ito nga, tinatawag na nila the historic vote noong September 16, 1991, kung saan merong 12 senators tayo na gumawa nga ng historical decision na pinigilan nila yung years of foreign military presence in the Philippines. Ito kasi itatawag natin RP-US Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Peace, kung saan bibigyan pa sana dapat ng 10 taon ang US sa Subic Naval Base nila during the time. Kasi nga kung ating babalik tayo sa ating kaysaysayan ng US military kasi NATO sa Philippines ay meron ng matagal siyang presensya dito. Nag-start to nung nagsinayin yung Military Base Agreement noong 1947 na nag-allow sa US to establish and operate air and naval bases sa Philippines for 99 years. Noong 1966, inamento, pinaiksin nila itong 25 years. Nung maglalapse ito noong September 16, 1991, nag-file ng bill sa or nagkaroon ng parang proposed treaty kung saan i-extend sana to ng 10 more years. Ang nangyari during that time, ang bumoto, ang tinatawag natin Magnificent 12, na wag tong ituloy. Sino-sino ba itong Magnificent 12 na ating Senado? Ito sa Senate President Jovito Salonga, si Senators Juan Ponce Enrile, si Butz Aquino, si President Joseph Estrada, si Teofisto Gingona, si Sotero Laurel, si Orly Mercado, si Ernesto Maceda, Aquilino Pimentel, si Victor Ziga, Rene Sagisak, and Wigbetter Tanyada. Ang nangyari kasi noon, 12 against 11 ang naging botohan. Kaya medyo mainit. Kasi naalala ko yan, during that day na botohan yan, I was outside of the Senate. As in, umuulan yan. Tapos, ang dami talaga, nandun yung pro-bases, nandun yung anti-bases. And makikita din natin kasi noon na marami sa mga anti-base lawmakers ang kanilang basic argument kung bakit gusto nilang ayaw nilang i-renew pa yung treaty na yan ay it undermines the Philippine sovereignty daw, and yun nga, meron nagpo-promote ng prostitution. Samantalang on the other side, isa sa pinakamalaking proponent or parang supporter ng extension ng treaty ay ating Presidente Corazon Aquino. Nag-lead pa nga siya noon ng march sa Senate ng yung mga supporters ng approval ng treaty. Ang sabi niya kasi, kapag pinaalis mo itong mga base na to, magkakaroon ng economic consequences kung aalis sila dyan. And sa malaki rin portion ng supporters na ay yung mga nandoon, siyempre malapit mga nakatira sa bases na yon. Kaso nangyari ngayong eruption ng Pinatubo. So during that time, parang nagkaroon pa ng lalong na umalis na, wala ka ng parang physically mahihirapan ka na mag-stay dyan kasi wala ka ng base na nag-stayan. So yun, parang historically, may nature, meron tayong legal history and merong natural incident kung bakit napaalis ang bases dito.
Dennis, I was about to ask you, yung bang pagputok ng Pinatubo, yung bang impending eruption ng Pinatubo, was the feather that broke the camel's back that forced the Americans out of the Philippines?
Palagay ko naging coincidence lang kasi nga paano mo o-operate yung base na yan kung punong-puno ka ng ash, di ba? Kaya after kasi niyan, doon nag-start kasi na parang sinabi ng maraming nationalist, yung mga nationalist group na na it's better na ang Pilipino ay tumayo sa sarili niyang paa. Kasi 'di ba, ang laki-laki kasi ng compound na 'yan, ang laki-laki ng lugar ng bases na 'yan. Yung Clark, yung Subic, 'di ba? It was converted into export processing zones, yung ano. And I think we were able to stand on our own economically.
Okay, let me ask our panel members. Did we benefit when the Americans left the country, or were we at a loss? Dr. Chester Cabalsa, you had the chance to study in the United States and the People's Republic of China. What are your thoughts about this?
Of course, basically, it was a boon and bane for the Philippines. But generally, if I may assess it, mas naging advantageous on the part of the Philippines. Basically, in terms of the governance, we try to stand up on our own. Of course, nakita natin na kaya palang tumayo ng Pilipino mag-isa without the support of superpowers. And secondly, nagkaroon din ng AFP modernization program kasi nakita natin very weak yung ating defense, and definitely it was based from the of course assessment ng mga ibang mga commission. Kailangan bigyan ng pansin because we have internal and external defense issues. Internally, meron tayong problem with the insurgency, and nakita natin yung terrorism. And then externally, nakita natin lumalakas ngayon yung aggressiveness ng China. And thirdly, economic-wise, nag-rise naman si Philippines without the support of the US and of course China at that time. So in terms of the that kind of framework, medyo maganda. I do agree that we need to to foster yung indigenous defense posture natin. Unang-una, yung over-reliance natin with the major powers like the US, yun din yung naging problem kung bakit ang hina ng external defense natin. Kasi napangakuan din tayo na kayo nang umintindi sa internal defense nyo. Sabi ng US, kami na sa external. Nung nawala sila, mukhang hindi natin na-prepare yung sarili natin dun sa external natin. At napansin din natin at that time, nung nandito yung US, si China, hindi niya pa matira-tira yung South China Sea at that time. So nung umalis si umalis si US, that's the only time na nagkaroon ng confidence din si China to expand its naval exercise in the South China Sea. So may dynamics technically dun sa hegemonic rivalry ng dalawang superpowers na ito. But at the same time, naipit si Pilipinas. The Philippines became dwarfed by these two titans or argonauts. But definitely, beyond that geopolitical issues, nag-rise up si Philippines as a middle power. Kasi tinitingnan nila dati, maliit na bansa lang yan. But because of these contentions and antagonism of these two rivals, nakita natin nag-rise up din si Philippines, because we were able to attract superpowers, and we were able to show respect also because in terms of lawfare, may isang kaso tayo na ipanalo, that was the Hague ruling in 2016 against a contending superpower that is China. So nakita natin ang daming advantages on the part of the Philippines, beyond all these dynamics of the two rival powers.
Yeah, Dr. Cabalsa, let me ask you before I go to the good lawmaker. Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia, they have no
I agree.
agreements with the United States or any country, and yet they stand on their own. What's wrong with us?
The over-reliance, over-dependence with the major powers. I do agree that the best case, the best models for Southeast Asia would be Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Tama po kayo doon. Ang ginawa po nila, because they don't have to, because that's the true essence of an independent foreign policy. Kasi yung non-reliance nila with major powers, tama kayo, they were able to execute it properly. Because nonetheless, kung mag-over-rely sila with major power, may mga concessions kang gagawin. Sa kanila, ginawa nila, let's build our own indigenous defense posture. Kaya nga ginawa nila, pinayaman nila yung bansa nila. Of course, on the part of Vietnam, kasi socialist sila, talagang I could remember when we went to Vietnam together with my MNSA students, itong mga military, ang general nila, ang sweldo lang nila 20,000 pesos. So ganun lang kaliit. With that bigger sweldo, salary, yung nationalism nila is very strong. Hindi nga sila makapagpadala ng estudyante sa Pilipinas kasi tingin nila ang mahal magpaaral ng estudyante nila dito sa Pilipinas. They cannot afford it. The point is, what I'm trying to drive at here is that you should have a strong nationalism, patriotism. Secondly, you need to build your defense posture. No, there's no hindi guarantee yung treaty treaty, no, defense treaty na uunlad at protektado ka. Mas maganda yung tumayo ka sa sarili mong paa. And lastly, of course, no, the drive for economic development. At the end of the day, yun nga yung development and security, no. Nagja-jive yan dalawa.
Okay. Yeah. Maganda yung sinabi mo, pero mukhang hindi ako makapaniwala. 20,000 pesos lang yung sweldo.
Yes, ganun po kaliit ang sweldo nila doon. At
pero
hindi nga
pagbuetin doon, ano?
Wala silang ganun. No? And really, I could remember ito nga yung sinabi ng general na nakapunta rin dito sa Pilipinas. No? How come that in your country, I see disparity? No? Mayroong isang building dito ng mga mayayaman, tapos dito ang mga squatter daw, informal settlers. Sa Vietnam, di mo makikita yan, sabi niya. Kahit mga gulay lang kinakain namin, hindi mo makikita mga informal settlers dito. And really, that's true. No?
Yeah. Okay. Magandang punto yan dahil sa lagi nating tinitingala yung superpowers. And yet, yung neighbors natin stood on their own. I remember visiting the Ho Chi Minh Museum in Hanoi, which had a slogan addressed to the Americans like, you may kill 10,000 of us today, you may kill 10,000 of us tomorrow, you will grow tired killing most of us, but in the end, we will win.
Yeah.
So, yung ganong drive, no? Pero mukha sa Pilipinas, Pilipino tago, Pilipino turo. Yeah, Congressman, what is wrong with us? Why do we have to depend on foreign powers for our own security?
Yes, Melo. Talagang malalim yung problema sa Pilipinas, no? Sabi nga nila systemic, no? Decades and decades of being under colonizers, no, especially yung ating, sabi nila, cholesterol mentality, colonial mentality with the US, no. So tama naman yung nabanggit ni Chester, no, and the other nakasamahan natin. Nung mapaalis ang mga base militar sa Pilipinas, isang major talaga doon na naipakita natin na hindi totoo yung hindi kayang tumayo ng mga Pilipino, no? Na pag wala ng Amerika ay babagsak ng Pilipinas. Napatunayan yon na kaya. Unfortunately, there were missed opportunities, no? For example, of truly pursuing an independent foreign policy away from its colonial master, no? Mainly ang Amerika, dahil napakatagal ng nating naging nasa access ng Amerika, no. In fact, dahil sa kanya napasabak tayo sa mga gera na hindi naman natin kalaban yung mga kalaban nila, no. So there were missed opportunities on that, no. In fact, kung gusto sana nating bigyan talaga ng meaning in spirit and in words yung mga nakalagay sa ating constitution, yun yung pagkakataon, no, na nagpursue tayo ng independent foreign policy just like the other neighbors natin, no, gaya ng Malaysia, Vietnam, and the rest, no. And kahit nung sinasabi nating after that nag-develop na tayo ng ating external capacity, that is I think a myth, no, dahil nakakawing pa rin yun, Melo, no, doon sa interest ng Amerika, no. In fact, doon sa ating sinasabing minimum defense posture na ginastusan na natin ng bilyon-bilyon, nasa second horizon na tayo, matatapos na yung second horizon, binenta yung mga military bases, yung ating mga properties, no, dyan sa Fort Bonifacio, sa ibang lugar pa para daw ma-develop. But look where we are now, no. In fact, maalala ko, during my first term, isa ito sa naging issue namin dahil yung binili natin sa Amerika, mainly sa Amerika, ay mga sobrang second hand, the mga barko, for example, no, mga decommissioned ano nila, ships, no? Coast Guard ships na 1960s pa. Kunwari, aid, pero nagbayad din tayo dahil it's a billion. No? So ganun yung nangyari. No? So yun ang sinasabi kong missed opportunities. No? And now, we are in a situation na we have an administration na gusto rin maglaro sa dalawang panig. No? While there is this sinasabi nilang kailangan i-develop ang ating external defense dahil sa threat ng China, expansionist policy ng China, pero nakikipaglaro din tayo sa China. Ano? So this is where we are now. The kind of policy that we have that sabi ko nga kanina is even more dangerous and disadvantageous to the country as well.
I do recall my first engagement with FOCAP when I joined FOCAP briefing with then Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert Del Rosario, and this was hosted by the FOCAP legend Gabi Tabunyal, may he rest in peace. And I asked the Foreign Affairs Secretary, why is it that I have this view that ships being bought by the Philippines are older than the captains who will man the ship? Why is it that the Coast Guard vessel that you will be buying, which will be delivered to the Philippines, is already old than most military officers? And the answer was, we're buying it at dirt cheap prices. Murang-mura lang. Pero ang sabi ko, mukhang wala namang hardware. Ang sabi, we will have to buy the hardware dahil sa bareboat lang yung nabili natin. At hindi lamang yon, sabi niya, meron ding batas na nagbabawal sa Estados Unidos na magbili ng war materials. Parang ganon yung pagkakasabi. So, we had to contend with what we bought. So, parang that's what you get for $5. Attorney Ligon, is it realistic?
Well, I don't know when it comes to the policy of the government buying second-hand or what. But siyempre, yan yung matagal na sangkot-sismo na hindi nasasagot. Bakit kung kukuha man tayo yung mga ganong klase, no? Yung mga helicopter nagpapagsakan at yung, habang sinasabi ko yan, na alala ko yung isang anecdote nung nangyari sa akin. Travel ako, one of my travels in Singapore. Alam mo sa Singapore, ang mga the best tourist guide dyan, yung taxi driver. And they're so opinionated, no? Pagsakay ko ng taxi, that was during the time of the previous administration. Sabi sa akin ng taxi driver, oh, you're from Philippines, ha? Your President Aquino, very funny, ha? You're trying to fight China, but you have this second-hand boat, fighting ship, huh? You're fighting China with that. How can you do that? And so I just smiled. Of course, I don't want to engage in a debate with him. I just told him, well, I will check with my government, but I'm not sure why are we doing that. So I narrated that because even outsiders, even non-Filipinos would notice that, even those not interested in foreign policy or what, no? Then the reply to you by Secretary Del Rosario probably made sense that because it's cheap and because we're trying to save our budget on something, and besides, we're not really looking into going into war. It's like, it's more of a practice equipment. Parang ganun siguro yung mentalidad. So, ba't gagastos ka ng malaki? Hindi mo naman talaga magagamit pa sa kung magkakagera. Anyway, yung reaction kanina regarding sa economics, no? I would agree with Chester. If there is an impact ng, let's say, mga US bases sa economy, it's purely at the most regional or local, no? Local lang. Hindi talaga, it does not, I don't see any economic relation, national economic improvement when you have that, no? Parang ang mabibigyan mo livelihood, syempre, yung malapit sa bases and everything. And the overall income, kung meron man, does not really affect the economic growth of the country. So tama ang mga observation ng mga kasama natin, nila Congressman at saka Chester, na nung umalis, hindi naman naging masama ang takbo ng Pilipinas. Nakaganda dahil nakita natin na we don't really really need the US bases. Now, this is now on the what happened, no? And I think the word there is that dynamics is correct. I've been you know this, Mel, and I've been lecturing this is a MCLE tong West Philippine Sea. Historically, yung nung mawala ang US bases, dun dumami yung mga pag-build ng artificial island at yung paggawa ng military installation ng China. That's the reality. Now, whether it's by design or what, makikita natin na dumami yan nung nawala na yung US bases. Nung nandiyan pa yung US bases, hindi sila masyadong makaporma. Now, is there a direct connection? Well, if you can see the time of the timeline, no, makikita mo na lumakas nga sila, and then yung pagtatayo ng ganyan, and of course, one factor also, US is not a signatory to UNCLOS, and even if the US will make a statement regarding, you know, the West Philippine Sea, no, segue ko ng konti. Ang China, malakas na sinasabi, you have no business interfering because you're not even a signatory, you know.
Yeah.
So yung mga ganyang bagay nakaka-apekto. Now, with the confused statement of our chief executive regarding winning the arbitration, that yung last discussion natin, that it was just a mere scrap of paper, and then suddenly merong threat na i-abrogate ang BFA. Logically, pag pinagsama-sama mo yan, magiging confident yung China. Hindi naman talaga ganun ang friendship nitong dalawa or what. Hindi malinaw yan because ito nga na lang natitira sa kanila. So, we can do whatever we want. You cannot help but think that way, no? I would say na while I am against any imperialist force to influence our country, it's a reality also in the global community that we need allies, we need friends to help us. But of course, we cannot depend on them. And also, just like the US, one biggest criticism, which we already discussed this in one of your programs, is they don't really give a categorical statement, no? Now, I will mention this again, no? Ironically, nung naging presidente si Trump, one of his security advisor came up with a statement, we are going to war with China. And you know what the Chinese did? Is right after that, a week after that, they came out with their website, we are also for freedom of navigation. In other words, nag-change din sila ng tone kung nakita nilang may malakas loob babangga, and especially unpredictable itong leadership na to. Okay. So, in other words, again, I will sum up what I said, yung economic progress or what is not connected with the stay of foreign power in the country. But definitely, there is an impact.
Yeah, but I have a question for you and for Chester and for Dennis. When do you know that the president is serious or joking or engaged in hyperbole?
I will yield the floor first to the two gentlemen.
Depende siguro kung sino yung nakikinig.
Sige, Dennis, sige nga.
Kasi di ba, yun ang problema kasi tulad sa sabi natin, when the president speaks, it becomes a state policy. Kaya nga, di ba, yun ang nagiging problema. Hindi mo alam kung kailan siya yung seryoso or kailan yung joke yan. Kaya in terms of foreign policy natin, medyo hindi siya ganun ka-clear. Idadagdag ko lang doon sa sinasabi kanina yung sa bentahan ng mga barko na medyo luma. During that time,
Antigo.
Kasi during that time na nine-negotiate kasi yung renewal ng military base trade agreement, ang pinopropose na babayaran sa atin ng US ay $203 million per year. Pero ang sabi sa mga reports kasi na tinitingnan ko ngayon, sobrang layo daw yan sa inaano natin. Parang hinihingi ng Senate ng Philippine government in exchange for the extension of the treaty. So parang siguro naging feeling ng mga magnificent 12 na senators noon, gusto mo kaming gamitin, bakit mo kami binabarat? So nung hindi hindi sila magkasundo doon sa kung magkano man niya, kasi parang nangibabaw yung usaping sovereignty versus yung renta, tapos nandiyan pa si Pinatubo, na-deny siya. Pero ito nga ironic dyan, kasi after nung ma-reject yan, si President Aquino lumabas na sinabi niya, we have to save the treaty through a referendum. Pero hindi naman yata natuloy yon, kasi nga sinasabi niya, economically baka magkaroon ng impact yan, and the aftermath of the denial ng treaty, makita natin na economically yun yung sumagot dun sa fear ng maraming pro-bases treaty na hindi naman ganun kalaking naging impact sa atin.
Okay. Yes, Chester, your thoughts, please.
Okay, basically, the president knows his audience. No, that's the reason why he gives flattery messages regarding these issues. No, and secondly, agnostic siya with when it comes to national security. Agnostic in a sense that sometimes, remember, recently, no, he kept mum about the aggressiveness of the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese military militia in some of the features, no, of the West Philippines nung nag-incursion na naman sila. Tapos whenever the US gives something to the president in support of his programs, he's very silent also. So napansin natin bakit ganun, no? Definitely that's a problem when you are playing with two camps, no? Hindi mo alam kung kailan ka magsasalita, hindi mo alam kung kailan ka titira, kumbaga lalo kang naiipit. I think that's a problem when you are playing on both sides. But nonetheless, nakita natin na the inconsistency of the foreign policy of the Philippines also, no? We've seen that starting 2016 up to now, hindi natin maintindihan kung ano yung independent foreign policy niya. Actually, I've written an article stating that there's no independent foreign policy in the Philippines because we're trying to assess it. Magkakaroon ng twilight zone niya na next year, magkakaroon tayo ng election, and we have not yet defined it actually. At yun ang naging problema because when we will rate him later on his foreign policy, kumbaga 4, no? Conditional, di natin alam kung ano yung independent
baka 4 sa Ateneo yan at sa Lasal.
Hindi, 4 sa UP.
Sa UP.
But definitely there's none. Actually, there's no independent foreign policy in the Philippines if we try to be honest and frank about it. No, that becomes a problem. No, it's a problematic. No, I think that's the assessment so far.
Yeah, Congressman, how independent is our independent foreign policy before I shift to another issue?
Well, gaya ng nabanggit ni Professor Chester, our independent policy, Melo, ay nasa constitution lang, no? Nasa litra ng ating constitution, pero hindi ito talaga ini-implement, no? In spirit and in words, no? Na meron tayong independent foreign policy. Gaya nga ng nabanggit ko, even when we welcomed it in 2016, nung sinabi ni Pangulong Duterte that he will be pursuing an independent foreign policy, he will cut his ties with America. But lo and behold, yung kanya palang independent foreign policy ay yung sinasabi niyang soft landing policy and pivot to China, no? And eventually, ito nga ngayon, nakikita natin na he's playing both cards, no? All these geopolitical games, no? And so again, do we have a policy, independent foreign policy? Yes, we have, but it's in our constitution only, no? Nakasulat lang dyan. At yun yung gusto nating ipurso dahil yun yung intent and at gusto ng ating mamamayang Pilipino when they ratified that 1987 Constitution, learning from our experiences, especially during the Marcos dictatorship and previous governments, no? Na kaya nga napaka-intense ng debate nito during the 1987 Constitutional Commission, ano? And talaga nakakapanghinayang, but hindi naman nawala lahat, no? Dahil meron na tayong pagbabatayan. And kung maniningil ang mamamayan na kailangan tayong magkaroon ng independent foreign policy, andyan sa ating constitution yan, at dapat we will hold the government accountable for that, no? And in fact, sa tingin ko, maging issue dapat ito sa darating na 2022 elections, no? Ano ba talaga ang tindig ng mga gustong tumakbo sa pagkapanguluhan pagdating dito sa usapin ng ating relasyon sa panglabas lalo.
But you will agree with me that politics in the Philippines is personality-based and not on the ideology nor the way of thinking. Kung magaling kang sumayaw, magaling kang kumanta, magaling kang manuntok, pwede kang presidente.
Yes, in large part, ganun pa rin ang ating politika, pero meron na rin tayong mga headways na at mga breakthroughs na nagawa dyan, ano? And it's really a challenge for us, no? Even the civil society, no? And the public at large. Ito yung naging hamon sa atin, especially with our experience in the past elections and in 2016, for example, when nung napaniwala tayo doon sa mga populist rhetorics, no? At nanalo si Presidente Duterte na sinabi niya, I will jet ski to Scarborough, no, to plant our flag. And several years thereafter, he will just admit that it's just bravado and a political joke, no? So I think it's a big lesson for us, no?
At yung mga naniwala,
how can
ganun. At
yes,
yung mga naniwala, ganun. Okay.
Yes, Melo, yun yung dapat, no? Kaya dapat in this 2022 election, while very precarious itong election na ito, first time siguro in our lifetime to have this kind of election in the midst of a pandemic, pero kailangan ilagay natin ito sa agenda, no? Yung mga usapin na ito, no, na that confronts our people at talagang merong long-term na epekto, no, sa kabuhayan ng ating mamamayan.
Yeah, Congressman, before I move to the good lawyers here, no, Congressman, let me ask you. Hindi kaya itong COVID-19 na ito ang nagdudulot ng problema sa atin dahilan sa halip na mapag-usapan yung issue, very basic muna yung pinagtutuunan natin ng pansin. Like for example, survival. The World Bank came out with a report saying that the Philippines is within the top 5 East Asia and Pacific countries in terms of undernutrition, and we are on the top 10 worldwide sa undernutrition, and that stunting is prevalent in Barm, Mimaropa, Bicol, and Western Visayas. So most people are poor. They cannot afford to eat nutritious food. So wouldn't they focus on survival first before we talk of national issues?
Tama rin yan, Melo, no? The biggest challenge talaga sa atin ngayon at pangunahing problema talaga ngayon ay itong napakatinding crisis na pinalala pa nga nitong pandemya ng COVID. But you cannot divorce it from other issues. If we will not pursue our claims dyan sa West Philippine Sea, tumindig tayo dyan, napakalaking epekto niyan sa kabuhayan ng ating mamamayan, no? And it will also spell a difference on how our country will move forward in the next decade post-pandemic, no? Or not even post-pandemic, facing more pandemics to come, no? So you cannot divorce it, but in large part, tama ka, talagang sikmura ang magiging malaking issue din, and how the government, this Duterte administration, address this issue of crisis na pinalala nitong pandemya ng COVID, no? Sa pinang-ayuda, COVID-19 intervention, itong mga bakuna at marami pang ibang samot-saring issues.
Kaya parang nakikinig-kinit ako yung night before election day, mukhang mahalaga. Mukhang nandun ang grasya. Attorney Ligon.
Reaction, no? Doon muna sa una sinabi ni Professor Chester. Again, that's a very sensible comment, no? Pag tinignan mo, pinakinggan mo ang ating national leadership through the chief executive, wala talagang clear independent foreign policy. Tama rin si Congressman na nandun, no, nasa Constitution. Maraming bagay lahat nasa Constitution lang, kaya anti-dynasty sinabi. Law should be made, pero hanggang ngayon wala pa, di ba? Maraming nandun na hindi nagaganap. No? Parang ang Constitution, pag pinasa mo lang o tinignan mo, isang drawing na hanggang doon lang, hindi nabibigyan ng buhay. Ngayon, I think yung kaninang tanong mo, pinakahuling tanong mo is how would you know kung kailan mo malalaman seryoso ang Pangulo o hindi? ang sagot ko dyan, sa pananaw ko, yung tingin niya kasi, well, the people like me for what I am. I will just be what I am. He is not the type who will give a professional, ideal statement of a president or a statesman. He doesn't care about that. Ang sa tingin niya, gusto ko ng ganito ng tao, I'll be like this. So parang he's running a town na, itong gusto ko, itong ganito. Nagpabago ko ng pasya, pero pati language. Because they are accepted, they have accepted me this way, I will do it. Doon nalilink ngayon yung personalized politics natin. And ang nakakalungkot nga dyan, pag tinignan mo yung personalized politics, doon mo makukonclude talaga yung sense of nationhood ng ating bansa, wala. No? Yung pagmamahal sa bayan, siguro mabibilang mo, hindi naman sa dahil nandito si Congressman Sara Teno, siguro maririnig mo yan sa mga representante ng bayan muna o ng mga ibang progresibong grupo na talagang yung interest ng bayan ang palaging sinasabi. Pero karamihan, if you look at even the legislative representatives, and then yun nga, yung national leadership, masyadong nakikita mo yung hindi well, in so many ways, no, sinasabi nila, unahin natin ang bayan, pero hindi ganun ang nangyayari.
Okay. So, what you're saying is, yung sense of nationhood napapalitan into sense of livelihood.
Sa kahirapan, ano? Pero yung sinabi mo kanina na dahil ba sa pandemic, ganito mag-isip. Kahit without the pandemic, yung sistema natin na pagdating ng eleksyon, nakakalimutan lahat yung dapat na pag-isipang issue at nauuwi dun sa, well, this is an entertainment, a circus. Dun pa rin nung nangyayari.
Yeah.
Kaya nga, ang nakakalungkot dyan, mag-uusap tayo pag malapit na eleksyon kung ano yung hinahanap na dapat na leader. Pero dapat continuous yan eh. And not only that, tama ka dun sa sinabi mong bago maggabi na eleksyon.
Night before.
They mastered it. Ganun ang gagawin dyan. Now, luckily, kung may mga political party nga na, let's say, yung mga party list na hindi nagdidepend sa ganyan, pero they are eaten by the majority who are practicing that kind of personal politics.
Pumunta ka na lang sa Camarines Sur, makikita mo, labanan ng mga tarpaulin ng mga Villafuerte at nung kung sino-sino eh. Pero nakakatulong sa livelihood yun dahil sa pakapalan, padamihan ng trapal.
Kumikita sila.
Dennis?
Saka Melo kasi tandaan natin, yung issues ng West Philippines medyo mas mukhang magiging sentro yan for the halalan next year. Lalo na kasi kung lilitaw yung nagtanong uli, yung nagtanong na fisherman noon. 'Di ba? Kasi ano yun usapan livelihood yung tanong na yun nung 2016 election tinanong niya na ba anong plano mo sa amin? Kasi kami mangingisda na nagkakaroon ng problema dahil sa issue ng West Philippines na yan. Sinagot na jet ski. So malamang ngayon, this year, dahil mas nagiging may ingay na itong West Philippines Sea, lalabas uli ang issue na yan next year. So yan ang abangan natin kung anong version ng jet ski promises ang ibibigay ng mga kandidato at kung paano nila liligawan ang boto ng ating mga botante. Kung paano nila sasabihin na ito ang kasagutan sa inyo. Tulad siya sabi, the night before, biglang lalilitaw dyan yung issue ng sikmura. Hindi na yung issue talaga ng parang ang minsan kasi yung issue ng independent foreign policy natin ay hindi nakakarating sa normal na tao unless i-convert mo siya doon sa malapit sa kanila. Yun nga, yung mangingisda na nawawalan ng isda, hindi makahuli. So doon mo pwedeng i-connect yan na kayo, ang independent foreign policy issues natin ay apektado kayo kasi ito, nawawalan kayo ng pagkain.
Okay. Pero you must also take into account, may mga kumandidato, walang sinabi, sumayaw lang, nanalo. O, paano ngayon yun?
Siguro it's yun ang magiging dapat magiging challenge ng mga ngayon na yung education ng mga botante na you should vote on the issues, not on the personalities. And totoo yan. Ang problema kasi ngayon, siguro, yun nga, masyadong limited pa rin ang pagkakaintindi ng mga maraming botante on the power of the votes. Na akalan kasi nila dahil sikat ka, may itsura ka, sumasayaw ka, kumakanta ka, sa'yo ang boto ko. Pero minsan, hindi nila natatranscend yung issue na merong mas malaking parang legal, mas malaking kapakanan ng bansa ang nakasalalay sa iboboto mo.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Chester, your thoughts, please.
Yes po, I remember in one of your programs we discussed about yung, of course, no, yung political culture and the electorate in the Philippines. And definitely we have to revamp it if we want some reforms talaga. No? Because basically, if we really want to have yung thinking leaders, we should have a large pool of middle class. Ito yung mga nakapag-aral at marunong mamili ng leader based from the qualifications, because basically yung mga qualifications natin for our candidates and politicians are not that enough. Itong nakakahiya kasi when we recruit new employees, personnel in our private and government institutions, bakit may qualifications tayong hinihingi? College degree, ganyan. Tapos pagdating sa presidente, basic qualifications lang yung hinihingi natin. That's so unfair. When in fact, the new electorate now, itong mga millennials and Generation YZ, talagang magagaling at masisipag at multi-talented. Kailangan baguhin din natin yung proseso. Now, when it comes to 2022 elections, no, these are some of my assessment. Definitely, there will be both superpowers. No, China and the US will support our presidential candidates because they have interest. Basically, we will see that. We will see Manchurian candidates. We will see American bets in 2022. Secondly, even if we are being lured by these superpowers, let's always remember the national interest of the Philippines. Last week, I've been lecturing at the National Defense College and also at the General Command and Staff College. I always warn our military officers to define and understand our national interest, because that complements and reflects the kind of strategic culture that we want. Because basically, we are lacking on this one. Paano mo ipaglalaban ang bansa mo kung di mo alam kung anong mga interest mo? And we should always remember also that the president, we should understand the stand of the president. Alam dapat nila kung ano ang personal interest at national interest ng presidente. They have to understand. Ang lumalabas kasi ngayon, panay personal interest ang lumalabas. Nawawala yung national interest. And we don't have a unified narrative when it comes to the West Philippine Sea. Iba-iba yung sinasabi natin. Look at Vietnam. Look at China. They have one unified narrative.
Okay.
Wala.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's go back to the issue. Ang tanong anong security advantages ng VFA, security in its traditional military defense sense? Hindi na muna natin pag-uusapan yung economic side of it.
Okay. For one, it's good that we were able to challenge naman yung we were able to review the VFA kasi matagal na, no? Iba yung security environment when it was crafted and created to the current security environment right now. We have also seen the strength of China, which is one of the reasons why we have to review this one. And the problem is we are also pivoting with China. And also in the military security domain, we are still looking at China as a threat. Kasi yung China threat is very strong in the narrative of the Philippine military. No?
Really?
But yes, opo, no? If you try to read some of their thesis and commandant's papers, talagang makikita mo yung strong China threat. No? Rarely do they write about our engagement, bilateral engagement. Yung pag tinitingnan nila yung bilateral engagement natin on China, it's more of the economic lang. But on the security, medyo limited ang ating engagement with China. So there is still distrust and mistrust with China. And we always see that in most of their thesis, because that's a reflection of their doctrines, no? Pro-US pa rin, no? And definitely that would also link us to the importance of the VFA. The mere fact that the AFP looks at the US as an ally and friend will definitely impact on the provisions of the VFA. I would suggest that once we approve this, dapat may symmetrical relationship ang Philippines and the US, because we've seen the asymmetrical relationship of the two parties, no. It is always advantageous to the American soldiers. Thus, yung crimes na nagagawa nila in the Philippines, sometimes we see preferential treatment with the Americans, which should not be. Nasa jurisdiction natin sila eh. And thirdly, it's good that yung counterterrorism, humanitarian and disaster relief operations, yun ang pwedeng maitulong ng US with us, no? Because definitely in all the support, may reciprocity talaga naman yan, no? And right now, it's good that the Philippines has money now to buy equipment. Lately, we were able to buy a brand new Black Hawk helicopters, no. Second batch na yan, by end of the year darating yung third batch. So may pera na tayo, and because of the AFP modernization program, at least may nasusunod na tayo. I remember in our discussion, no, bakit before panay second hand yung nabibili natin, because we had issues with the procurement. And lately, nosebleed para sa AFP yung procurement issues natin, because basically it's only now that we were able to deal it professionally. And I think our military is open for reforms and transformation.
You know, during my younger days in Bicol, I had the longest flying time on UH-1H helicopters as a media man, no? Pero whenever I took the UH-1H helicopters, I really felt closer to God, because we didn't know whether we will land safely. O pag nakalanding naman kami, salamat din sa Diyos, no? Dahil nakalanding kami ng maayos. Would like to acknowledge, narito na si Professor Lucio Pitlo. Magandang araw, Professor. Mabuti naman may internet na kayo. Magandang umaga. Yes, please.
Magandang umaga po. Malinaw po ba?
Maganda. Good.
Sir, good morning po. I'm sorry to came in late. I have to find a coffee shop na nearby that is open and will allow me to take part in this conversation. I'd be happy to share my insights on this subject.
Yes. Yung Visiting Forces Agreement abrogation, how does that sound to you? Para kasing tsa-tsa nangyayari.
Well, I think.
Yes,
well,
Professor.
My take on that is that, of course, this is already the third time that the administration had extended the suspension of the termination of the military pact. I think that for one, the Duterte administration doesn't want to leave a legacy as the one who have upended a critical military agreement with a long-time ally, considering the very deep historical ties between the two countries and the very strong mill-to-mill ties, no, despite of course, the difficulties in Philippine-US relations in the last 5 years under the Duterte administration. But on the other hand, he also doesn't want to sign on into continuing the VFA as it is, because of course of the possible backlash from the progressive groups opposed to the continuation of this agreement. And also, of course, Duterte administration had been very cautious in trying to navigate, the growing rivalry between US and China. So I think the VFA pact will put, of course, the Philippines in a tight bind as US and China continues to, escalate their tensions, especially in the South China Sea area.
Okay. Let me pose the question again to Congressman Caloy, to Attorney Ligon, kay Attorney Gorecho. may advantage ba, security advantage ba ang VFA? Security in its traditional, military, and defense sense. Tabi muna natin yung economic. Congressman, what are your thoughts about this? Is it to our advantage to have the VFA?
Well, consistent naman yung aming tindig dyan, Melo. No? Ito kasing BFA, hindi mo ma-divorce ito doon sa Mutual Defense Treaty. No? Ito kasi yung kanyang pinagmumulan. No?
Mhm.
So, to us, this is a stage of this continuing relationship we have with the US na talagang disadvantageous to us. No? And sabi ko nga, this is one missed opportunity. No? Yung tingnan mo, nabanggit natin kanina, yung iba naman nating mga kapitbahay na bansa ay wala namang ganitong colonial, post-colonial treaty, no? na natatali tayo doon sa isang superpower. No? At maraming implications ito, hindi lang militarily, economically and politically, no? hanggang ngayon. Despite the so-called navigation of this Duterte administration, no, to keep a balance between itong sitwasyon natin with America. So so talagang sa tingin namin all of these unequal relations we have no with the US and even with China for that matter ay kailangan bigyan na natin ng wakas, ano. Kung gusto talaga nating umunlad ang ating bayan at tumindig tayo sa ating sarili, gaya ng nabanggit kanina ni Professor Chester, ang Vietnam nga, no, talagang nagsakripisyo sila. 20,000 lang yung sweldo ng kanilang general, no, nagsakripisyo. Pero dito sa atin, hindi mo masabi yan dahil kaya nga gusto mag-general ng lahat dahil may pabaon silang milyon-milyon. No? So, ganun, no? Mas inuuna yung pansarili na kapakanan kaysa doon sa overall na kapakanan ng ating bayan. No? Napakita naman din natin kasi Melo na may kakayanan ng Pilipinas na ang mga Pilipino, no, kahit saan ka pumunta sa ibang bansa pag may mga Pilipino na talagang nagra-rise, no, bakit pagbalik sa ating bansa ay talagang parang lumalakad tayo ng paurong, ano, yung napag-iwanan na tayo dito sa ating rehiyon, no. So yun yung isang talagang tingin namin diyan, yung very unequal relationship we have dito sa mga malalaking makapangyarihang bansa na ito ay dapat putulin na natin yung umbilical cord na yan, no? And we have to stand on our own and develop not only our military capabilities, no, security capabilities, but more importantly yung ating ekonomiya, lalong-lalo na ngayon na nasadlak tayo dito sa matinding krisis, no, na pinalala pa nitong pandemya ng COVID.
Okay. Yeah, and with what you said, it only strengthens the saying there is definitely no free lunch, no? Wala. So kung nakikipagkaibigan man yung mga yan, kay Amerika, kay China, dahil may pakinabang sa atin, no? Parang ganun.
Kasi talagang tinutulak nila naman, Melo, yung sarili nilang interest din, ano? Kahit na yung andyan yung Mutual Defense Treaty since 1951, kung talagang gusto ng Amerika to check the expansionist moves of China, di ginawa na niya yan noon pa, no? Nung sisimula pa lamang magtayo ng mga struktura sa ating mga bahura itong China. Bakit ngayon lang, no? And I read yesterday they are planning to put up a NATO-style naval force dito sa Asia Pacific, no? So what is happening now dito sa South China Sea ay parang bumalik tayo doon sa Cold War, no? And they want to militarize South China Sea, itong dalawang bansang ito na nag-aaway. So it's again, I think, an opportune time for the Philippines, no, to pursue an independent foreign policy and call for a demilitarization of the South China Sea, no? And in fact use to our advantage yung naging decision ng Philippine Permanent Court of Arbitration.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Ligon, your thoughts, please.
Yes. Without looking into the other factors involved in the Visiting Forces Agreement, no? Yung nabanggit na yung recognition of what the Americans can do here and the Filipinos on the other hand, no? By just looking at the mechanism, yung exercise, I would say yung interoperability, yung maritime
security domain, makakatulong, no? Kasi may mga technology na pwede namang saluhan dyan at dun nga sa issue ng nangyayari dito sa West Philippine Sea, mas mag-i-improve ngayon yung tinatawag na confidence level when it comes to you have a friend who's having an exercise with you. Doon lang sa aspect na yun, ano? Siyempre, pag tinignan mo overall yung mga kulatilla and other details na nakapaloob sa agreement, you will arrive at a conclusion na lugi ang Pilipinas dito sa agreement. Hindi ba dati nga sinabi natin i-review yan at alisin dapat ipaglaban yan. But the question of will that be good if there's a visiting forces agreement in terms of exercising in the, let's say, this maritime security domain, awareness also, makakabuti yan. Kasi we need that kind of technological know-how and exercise in helping our soldiers dun sa how to guard and patrol the Philippine area. So, dun sa aspect na yan, hindi technical. Pagka sinama mo na lahat yung mga underlying interest agenda, doon na nagiging negative. That's why I think as a citizen, no, love this country.
Bago tayo talaga magdidesisyon, let's look at the overall agenda of each one. We cannot deny na yung mga bansa may interest kasi gusto nilang magkaroon. But we can also make use. We need to have our interest. Kaya nga na po yung United Nations, no? Kaya nga nandun yung United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, very clearly naman for peace siya. But it does not reject the assistance, the cooperation of nations when it comes to this thing. So kailangan lang i-divert doon and i-safeguard natin yung tinatawag na national interest at ipaglaban yung fairness of the treatment of its member state.
Okay, very well. All right. Yes, Attorney Dennis, your thoughts, please?
Pinag-usapan kasi 'di ba kanina yung parang unequal relationship of under sa BFA. No? Siguro pwede lang i-enumerate ko lang yung mga nagiging points ng National Union of People's Lawyers with regards to the BFA kasi medyo lagi sila involved diyan on the legality of the BFA. Isa sa nire-raise kasi nila diyan ay ang Pilipinas daw kailangang isurrender niya custody ng US personnel upon request under the BFA. Samantalang ang US government daw ay hindi obligated to transfer the custody of an accused Filipino person in the US under BFA. So yan yung isa. Meron din silang ni-raise dito ng US prisons at hindi embassies ng Pilipinas ang pwedeng ilagay ang ating mga personnel doon. Samantalang dito, pwedeng ilagay sa embassy nila ang ating ang kanilang US personnel. Diba? Kaya nga nangyari yung actually na-test nga itong BFA sa dalawang kaso yung kay Laude sa yung isa na apat na US personnel. Tapos ang mga US personnel daw ay exempted sa visa, unlike yung sa atin, hindi siya exempted. Kasama rin dyan yung issue na bakit ang US troops exempt sa taxes, samantalang sa Pilipinas sila ang ating mga Filipino personnel ay hindi exempted.
Yeah.
Tapos meron din dyan, ito nga medyo ang Philippines daw ay mag-waive ng any claim for deaths or injuries of Filipinos resulting from the VFA, samantalang ang mga US ay hindi nag-waive ng claims for any deaths or injuries of Americans. So parang yan ang nire-raise ng National Union of People's Lawyers. Actually, member din ako dyan. And si Kakaloy, medyo pareho kami kasi pareho kami ng organization. So yun yung para sa points na laging nire-raise ng NUPL at ang bayan muna kung bakit ang VFA ay hindi siya pantay. Meron dyan unequal relationship between the US and the Philippines.
Now, do beggars have a choice? Let me ask you that. We are being looked down as beggars. Can we bargain? Sino kaya pwede sumagot? Kakaloy.
Alam mo, Melo, we need not be beggars if kung gugustuhin talaga natin, no? Kaya nga napakalaki ng interest ng dalawang bansang ito sa atin dahil nakita nila yung potential ng Pilipinas. So kung talagang sa tingin ko titindig lang ang Pilipinas, no, doon sa nakatitik at nakasulat sa ating saligang batas, ay kaya nating tumayo, no? gaya rin ng iba pang mga bansa na kapitbahay natin. No? Sabi nila, napakaliit kasi ng Pilipinas, wala tayong magawa dyan. Kailangan natin kumapit sa malalaking bansa. Meron pa nga mas maliit sa atin. Bakit yung Singapore? No? Napakaliit naman yan. Nung kumalas siya sa Federation nila ng Malaysia, talagang ang sinabi ng marami noon, talagang walang mangyayari dyan sa Singapore. Pero nilinang ng Singapore yung ano yung kanyang advantages at kakayahan, no, bilang economic hub dito sa Southeast Asia. And I think maraming potentials ang Pilipinas na hanggang ngayon ay hindi natin fully nalinang, no? At talagang umaasa lang tayo doon sa kung anong ididikta sa atin ng mga dayuhan. So, nakapanghihinayang yan dahil natagurian pa naman tayong napakaunang bansa sa Asia na kumalas sa kadena ng talikala, no, nung colonialism, but tayo patuloy ang napag-iwanan ngayon, Melo. So hindi kailangan magmalimos tayo, no, kung talagang gusto nating tumindig at umunlad ang ating bansa.
Yeah. Professor Lucio, Professor Lucio, your thoughts, please. Sandali po, Katon.
Dapat talaga maging pulubi sa sarili nating bansa. Kaya ang talagang sa akin nakikita kong pinaka magandang magiging unang solusyon ay yung bawat Pilipino madama o gawin sa gawa yung pagmamahal sa bayan.
Okay.
At historically kasi, ang problema natin, dahil na rin sa pagkakaiba-iba ng ating mga uri o yung yung clannish mentality, ano? Pagdating mo sa South, Bisaya, pagdating sa North, ganito. Ang Singapore, tama yung sinabi ni Congressman, yung example yan, isa lang yun, nandun lang, ano? Kahit na iba-iba silang klase doon, nandun lang sila, occupied sa isang lugar. Now, dun sa Vietnam, ang experience ng Vietnam, talagang muna pa lang lumaban na sila, no? Tayo naman, nagsimula na nag-away-away, pero nagkasama, pero nung nakita natin na meron tayong mga kaibigan, naging mentalidad na yung ito kasama natin, ito kalaban natin.
Okay.
Kaya kailangan masimulan yung tinatawag na pagmamahal sa bayan na meron ka sariling identity as a nation.
Okay. Thank you. Professor Lucio, your thoughts?
Idagdag ko lang po, no? Kasi nabanggit rin po kanina ni Professor Cabalsa yung modernization, no? Nung nakahabol po ako. Well, in recent years, na patuloy naman yung investment ng pamahalaan dito sa pagpapalakas ng ating AFP at pati na rin ng Coast Guard at yung pagpapalakas din ng patrolya natin dito sa West Philippine Sea. I think ito mga hakbang na to, no? Kasama na rin yung pag-upgrade ng ating mga facility dito sa Pag-asa, yung seat ng ating pinakamaliit na town, no, sa Kalayaan. So, at yung proposal na gawin ng logistics hub, yung Pag-asa para mapaiksi yung turnaround time ng patrolya, no, na hindi na manggagaling ng Puerto Princesa, manggagaling na sila ng Pag-asa, and then patrol our waters dito sa Kalayaan. So, I think ito mga hakbang na to, small steps, pero as long as they would be sustained, I think they can make a big difference, no? Yung usapin ng VFA sa pangkalahatan sa ating seguridad, again, yung hindi natin kailangan maging mendicant o maging beggar, no? Kasi over the past years, makikita natin yung mga kapitbahay natin sa Southeast Asia at yung rehiyon natin, no, nagiging siyang theater ng competition ng dalawang higante, no, ng Estados Unidos at ng China. Tayo ay nasa gitna ng tunggalian na yon. Ngayon, lumalakas yung ating agency. Kumbaga, yung bargaining ability natin, no, considering that both countries are trying to court us, no. Ang Estados Unidos, kailangan ng lokasyon ng Pilipinas, na very strategic ang location natin. It would allow the US to respond to contingencies in the South China Sea. Tayo kasi ang pinakamalapit, no, na at historically willing, no, nakapag-host tayo ng mga tropa ng Estados Unidos at ng mga assets nila. So, kumbaga, among the countries in the region, Pilipinas ang tinitingnan nila na most likely na would welcome US troops and US assets. Kasi meron nang tratado, no, MDT, meron tayong EDCA, may VFA. Ngayon, syempre, mas mataas na yung risk natin ngayon, no? Kasi yung competition nga ng US and China nandiyan na. So are we playing our cards well?
Okay.
So yung issue ng criminal jurisdiction, yung i-improve ng reciprocity ng BFA, yun ay isang issue. Pero mas malaking issue sa palagay ko, yung risk that we would take. Now, if we would allow BFA and the resumption of the US troops and US assets back into the country, it would help us in a way send signals to China, maybe help us improve our readiness, our capabilities, gaps in our capabilities. But at the same time, we would have to incorporate the risk. So I think yung mas malaking strategic calculus na dapat nating tingnan.
Okay. One last point, gentlemen, before we say thank you again. May tanong kaya si Kelsey? Kelsey, got some questions? Okay. Wala yata. O, sige. Let me pose the question to our guests. Economics naman ito. Pero ganito kasi, kamakailan yung G7, nagsabi sila na magkakaroon sila ng palatuntunan similar to the One Belt, One Road. Ano? Ito yung kanilang Build Back Better World. No? At tatapatan yata yung impluensya ng China sa daigdig. Ano kaya? Tatanggapin kaya ng Pilipinas yung alok nitong G7? O nakinabang din ba tayo doon sa One Belt, One Road ng China as a country and as a people? Professor Pitlo, you had the chance to study in China and in the United States. Your thoughts, please.
Well, I think as a developing country, with huge demand for infrastructure investments, any initiative from any partners is welcome. So I think the devil is in the details. How do we try to improve our negotiating capacity? How do we try to make sure that the clauses and the provisions would not be disadvantageous to us? So regardless if it's called Belt and Road, Build Back Better, Daang Bakal, Daang Matuwid, kung sino man yung nagpo-propose, regardless of the proponent at yung name ng initiative, yung pagtingin pa rin dun sa yung nitty-gritty ng detalye, yun ang importante sa atin. Pero as a country which needs infrastructure investments, it's something that we should welcome. Kasi more alternatives is better. We do not want to be too beholden to just one partner in terms of infrastructure investments or trade.
Very good. Thank you. Attorney Dennis?
Siguro ako, susuportahan ko lang yung statement din ni Professor Pitlo na even if it's good in paper, you should analyze it, yung mga details. Kasi minsan, ang ganda-ganda niyan sa paper, ang ganda-ganda sa pangalan, yun nga, yung build, yung road, ganyan. Pero in reality, marami siyang palatilyan na kapag nandyan na, magugulat ka na lang na ang Pilipinas pala ay nababaon na sa utang. So yan ang dapat pag-aralan ng ating mga policy makers na hindi porke maganda ang pagkakasulat niya, in reality, nasa ilalim yung talagang meat of the paper niya. So yun lang natin, na pag-aralan mabuti before i-alok, pagdebatehan, hindi tipong magugulat na lang yung Pilipinas na nandyan na siya, pero baon naman tayo sa utang na ilang dekadang babayaran.
Okay. Yeah. Attorney Tony?
Yes, yung plan ng G7 to counter China,
One Belt, One Road.
Yeah. That is again, that's a positive approach, no? And it proves a counterbalance to what China is doing. No? I think the objective is good, but I will, as a practicing lawyer and as again a responsible citizen of this country, we should look out for those particular provisions that will in a way prejudice our interest. So sa madaling salita, tama na i-welcome natin yan kasi nga sa katulad nga itong nangyari sa Bill. Alam na natin nangyari yung pinangako ng China, hindi rin natupad dito sa Pilipinas, no? So hindi dapat matutunan tayo doon, pero huwag nating i-reject sapagkat kapag nakita ng China o ng iba pa na parang one-sided lang yung pag-iisip natin,
hindi makakabuti sa atin yun. I-welcome natin, but with caution na lahat ng bagay na yan, ipapaalam natin and there's transparency sa mga mamamayan para alam natin ng pamahalaan kung anong pinapasok. And that is also in line with the freedom of information and the right to information of every citizen.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Cabalza, your thoughts, please.
Yes, I do agree with all their comments, no, that we should also welcome that proposal, no. But nonetheless, ang naging problema kasi is they always find some loopholes in the Philippines, like the reason why the World Bank, the US cannot afford to give us some infrastructure programs because of the human rights violations of the Philippines. Ngayon, kung itong G7 will propose the same thing with us, naturally they will look at our background again, tapos and then of course they will look at the human rights violations and of this incumbent government. It's the reason why they cannot give some infrastructure programs with us. But 2022 is coming up and we will have a new president, and this should be a lessons learned for all of us, particularly for the next president, that in the spirit of the independent foreign policy, it's not only about security, but also about economics. Let's continue into the diversification of our relations with other countries. If Japan through JICA can offer that, the US through World Bank, IMF, and the G7 will give us opportunities, let's welcome that as long as we comply to the international norms. Let's not violate human rights abuses, and then let's be good nations to the international community. No, let's be good country to the international system. But one last thing, no, the problema sa atin, no, mga Pilipino at sa ating bansa. May tanong yung estudyante ko sa UP, sabi niya, "Sir, bakit napaka-divisive natin? Simula pa lang ng Spanish period hanggang ngayon, ganun pa rin ang character natin." And ang sagot ko sa kanila, alam mo, ang Pilipino at ang Pilipinas, we always look for which one is most powerful. Kung sino yung makapangyarihan. Yun ang nagiging problema natin. At nakikita natin ngayon, namimili tayo between the US and China. Kung sino ang makapangyarihan sa kanila, doon tayo lulugar. Doon tayo magbe-bet. And that has become a problem. Let's stop this vicious cycle, this systemic problem of the Philippines. Let's stand up on our own. Yun lang ang solusyon. Hindi tayo makakatakas sa problema nito. Kung ganun din lang, mamimili na naman tayo. Tumayo tayo mag-isa. Kaya natin to. Yun lang po.
Okay. Yes. Congressman?
Well, parang nagkakasundo naman kami lahat, Melo, ano? Dahil talagang dapat maging cautionary tale natin yung mga naging relasyon natin sa mga bansang ito sa nakaraan, no? And even hindi lang dito sa mga malalaking formasyon ng mga bansang ito, no? G7, yung China, no? Kahit na sa mga multilateral agencies, no? All of these so-called aid or tulong or whatever you may call that, talaga namang may attach na mga strings attached yan. Kaya dapat tama na ang pamantayan dapat ng Pilipinas at ng ating pamahalaan kung ano ba yung talagang to the best interest of our people and our country, no, without us leading us doon sa halimbawa debt trap, no, na ito na yung nangyayari ngayon, trilyon na yung utang natin, no, at sino ba ang magbabayad niyan, no, ang mga tayo at ang mga sunod na henerasyon ng mga Pilipino, no. Hindi pa nga tayo nakaalpas doon sa pinag-uutang ni Marcos, no? Hanggang 2025 pa natin babayaran yung pinag-uutang ni Marcos, and here we are again going to the same direction. So tama na i-welcome yung mga tulong dahil we are still part of the community of nations, but dapat maging maingat, no? At talagang titingnan natin, no, kung ito ba ay makakatulong doon sa binanggit ni Professor Chester sa ating objective na tatayo tayo sa ating sariling paa at linangin natin ang ating mga kakayahan, no, para tumayo bilang bansa at isang proud na bansa, no, dito sa parting ito ng mundo. Amen.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. One last point, pahabol ko lang, baka may gustong sumagot. sinabi ng Pangulong Duterte the other night, are you crazy? Yung tungkol doon sa ICC. Hindi ako magpapaimbestiga sa mga puti na nanakop sa amin. How do you look at that? Attorney Ligon, being a lawyer, a practicing lawyer that you are, how do you look at that?
Well, there's established system for yung international investigation or commission of crimes, no? And since we are signatory to the
United Nations, wala tayong magagawa. Now, of course, the statement that yung mga nanakot o what, playing on the independence or on the anti-colonial mentality na ginagamit pag makakatulong, no? Pero sa akin, there is that process and we should do that, no? Hindi natin maiiwasan. Otherwise, kung sino man ang magaging abusive na leader, wala nang pananagutan because he can do in his term whatever he want to do. So, again, you will go back to your question, is he serious or not? Whether he is serious or not, there are other observers or nations that will check on this, and I welcome that. You should welcome that.
Okay. Yeah.
Siguro sir, no one is above the law, not even the president, no? Kailangan accountable siya sa lahat ng mga desisyon at mga pinaggagawa niya. Kaya sinasabi yun din, natatakot siya. At darating yung panahon na babalikan siya sa lahat ng mga ginawa niya. Yun lang
May
po.
dadagdag lang ako, isa sa justice kasi dyan sa ICC na yun, ay dati kong professor, si Raul Pangalangan, si Judge. Kaya pag nakita uli kami, tatanungin ko siya, Sir, balita ko, racist daw, medyo may statement si Duterte tungkol sa inyo. Anong comment? Kasi Justice Pangalangan, siya yung sa kanya ako nag-oath taking ko nang maging presidente ako ng Maritime Law Association of the Philippines. Na yan si Attorney Ligon ay isa ring naging member namin. Kasi nga active din yan sa organization namin, yung Maritime Law Association of the Philippines. And recently, nag-issue nga kami ng statement din on the West Philippine Sea. Siguro sa isang session na lang yun.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. No problem. So, promise mo yan.
Short
get
lang,
in touch with your professor Pangalangan. Get in touch.
Atakin ko siya pag nakauwi na siya dito. Kasi natapos yung term niya, katatapos lang. Katatapos yung term niya as justice ng...
Congressman Caloy, si Lucio muna. Lucio. Professor Lucio Pitlo.
Sir, please.
Yes,
wala naman akong comment, sir. I'll give way to Kong Sarate.
Okay. Yes. Yes, please.
Yes, Melo. Yung gagamitin na itong race card, no? Na racist ang ICC. Well, in fact, hindi naman. No? Kahit tingnan mo yung composition ng kanilang mga judges, ay marami nga dyan coming from African countries. At gaya ng nabanggit kanina ni Attorney Dennis, katatapos lang ng term ng ating si Dean Pangalangan, no? Justice Pangalangan. So, I think itong paggamit ng race card is more addressed pa ito doon sa mga followers ni President Duterte, no? Para pakalmahin sila na okay lang ito, kaya natin ito. But in truth and in fact, this will not prevent the ICC, no, from conducting its own, kung mag-proceed na doon sa stage of preliminary investigation. Gaya ng napanggit ni Kompanyero Ligon, mayroon naman silang set standards, no, na this has been walang politika rito, no, at itong mga rules na ito ay ginamit sa lahat na naakusahan diyan sa ICC. So as Chester has been saying, eventually the long arms of justice, no, will make you accountable for all the things that you did, no, while you are in office. So yun yung essence kasi talaga pag official ka, dapat maging accountable ka sa lahat ng mga ginawa.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember asking our bishop in Legazpi, si Bishop Joel Zay Bailon. Sabi ko, what are your thoughts about this? Ang sagot niya sa akin in Bicol, kung mayong tinatago, tano tamahabo. Kung wala kang tinatago, bakit ka tatanggi? Yun lang ang sabi. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking time out to be with us. Congressman Caloy Zarate, this is not the last time.
Yes.
Dr. Chester Cabalza, Attorney Tony Ligon, Professor Lucio Pitlo III, and Attorney Dennis Moretso. we are moving to our 5th anniversary on July 7. So thank you very much. God bless us all. Till next time. Thank you.
Salamat, Pedro. Salamat sa
Salamat
lahat.
po. Bye-bye.